Good evening. This is towards the end of day 4 of IPDET 2014. Yay! And it's the kickoff, really, of our speaker series, right? We're going to have a series of guest speakers at lunches and at dinners. You've already had one speaker during the regular session time. But it's the kickoff of our dinner and luncheon series speakers tonight. And I want to say, before I get into this, I want to let you all know that you are now on the IPDET listserv. And you will find in your emails an email from me welcoming you to the listserv and also telling you how to use it. So a round of thanks is really due to Mary Dixon, if she was here, for getting this done and getting you all on so quickly. So you'll start seeing the messages. Sentia, we thank Mary a whole lot for doing this so quickly. This evening we have coming all the way from Australia, Patricia Rogers. And we're delighted that she's here. We tried to get her last year, and with one thing or another, she couldn't make it. This is her first visit to IPDET. Yeah, her first time. She is a professor of public sector evaluation at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology in Australia. She's very, very well known for a website that I think I mentioned this morning to most of you, or the other day when we were talking about good sources of information. And that is called Better Evaluation. And it's a very nice, good supplementary website for you to refer to for resources. Patricia has 20 years of experience, very well recognized in the evaluation profession. She has won the American Evaluation Association's Gunnar and Alvar Myrtle Award for evaluation practice, and she's won various other awards. She's very active in the evaluation field. I know she's also the author of several evaluation books, and I believe you have a new book that's come out recently that you've co-authored. She is particularly up, I think, I was very interested when I heard Patricia lecturing on some new evaluation approaches, particularly sort of those in the digital age. And that is actually the subject of what she's going to talk about tonight. And I look forward to hearing her talk, as I know you do. Please give her a big IPDET welcome. Patricia.
Good, thank you. This is a great honour and privilege to be here with you tonight. IPDET has such an international reputation, and to actually get to see this myself is terrific, and to have a chance to explore some of these issues with you tonight and then tomorrow is terrific fun and definitely worth travelling from the other side of the world to do. When I suggested this topic, I didn't know the profile of the participants, and recently I was sent the demographics of this group, and it made me really stop and think about this issue of the digital age. So when we're talking about the digital age, we're talking about the sort of different types of technology, some which you think about in terms of computers, but also digital cameras and what they've done to evaluation, even handheld calculators and phones and videos, and a lot of the digital technology that's changed a great deal how we collect data, how we access data, how we can analyse it and share it. And it is an exciting time in terms of opening up opportunities. And when I was thinking about, so when is the digital age, right? There were dinosaurs, and then there was, I don't know, little mammals, and now we're in the digital age. When did it start? And how does that relate to our lifetimes? Because in a way, we have all grown up already in the digital age. And I think that's one of the issues, is about what are the bits that are, for us, taken for granted? What are the things that are actually new? And so, you know, some people date it back to 1951, which is the sort of first commercially available computer, changed things. Now that means all of us have grown up within that. Then we have the video recorders, and this revolution that you didn't have to use this film and send it away. You could actually do video recording. IPDET, the start of what was the precursor to the internet, actually goes right back to 1969. So some of this has been around a long time. The first working digital camera in 1975, but they were not widely used. Now, looking at the demographics, 3/4 of the people here are under 40. So this is, for them, everything after this they've grown up with and taken for granted. And this is such a change for us to imagine what things were like without that. I have 2 sons, and when I was putting together pictures for my husband's 50th birthday, I got out the photographs from him at university, and there were, you know, 4 or 5. And my children said, "Where are the rest of them?" I said, "Well, you know, we were poor students, and you had to buy film, and then you had to go down to the chemist, and you had to pay for it to get developed and printed and put it in, like, you know, that. This is the photos." And now, of course, digital photography, it's, you know, free to take them, and it's just transformed things, and it's just hard for them to imagine what it was like without that. This is a big one for me. 1983, this was when I was working in local government, and I actually unpacked the first personal computer in this local government authority. And the manager of the computer, the IT, the computer people, computer section came and said, "Can I help unpack it as well?" Because he'd never seen one. All right, so this revolution. There was a program to improve local government financial management, and there was this sort of idea they were going to build a tool, you know, this thing that you just plug the numbers in and it would do everything for you. And what they realised was that wasn't what they needed. What they needed was to teach people to use this new thing called Lotus 123, which was a spreadsheet, and it would actually give them the tools to be able to do things. And then I taught the people within the council how to use it, and the town clerk said to me, "You mean, if we think the column needs to be 8 characters wide, and then we discover later it could be 10, you can just widen it?" Because he'd had this whole program where they'd done it on a mainframe, and if you got it wrong, you just lost the data, right? So people from that era were very worried about the catastrophic problems that they could cause by getting it wrong. And it made me realise it's not just new technology, but it's a new way of doing it, that you could do a version and get it, you know, somewhat right and then improve it. First handheld mobile phone. Do you remember the old mobile phones, the big bricks you used to carry around? I was in a program where the service deliverers had a mobile phone so they could be contacted, and there was terrible resentment within the rest of the organisation that these people should have a mobile phone because it was seen as an executive toy. And that was a huge barrier. A big part of our evaluation was actually demonstrating how these were an integral part of them doing their job, and they should have these mobile phones. So, first laptop computer came on really late when I was working in local government and trying to learn how to use this personal computer. I had this theory: people were allowed to take it home on weekends, even if they played computer games, because we figured just at least they were becoming familiar with it. And so we would get a desktop and we would unpack it, and people would take it home for the weekend because there was no such thing as a laptop. Right? And I had to justify why playing computer games on a weekend was actually a good thing. Right? Internet started to be available for commercial use, and for someone working in Australia, this was just transformational. EvalTalk started, it's the discussion list for the American Evaluation Association, and I could post things, and people whose books I'd been reading would respond, and we would have these discussions. And when I then went to the conference, there were all these people I'd been talking with on the computer. So for an isolated person working a long way away from them, this was transformational. Oh, and YouTube and Facebook and so on. Now, this all stops here, but in fact, the pace has been accelerating. And I just wanted to sort of step through some of the changes. You would have your own pivotal moments of when technology changed the way you do things. My father-in-law's 82. He's just gone on Facebook, and it's just fantastic. He just put a selfie up of him, and it's just a brilliant thing that he's now getting in touch with the sort of dispersed family. Right, he's gone up the learning curve and connecting with it. But when we have So we are all still on this trajectory. It's not like, okay, we've got it all now, right? The digital technology is still expanding, and that's a real challenge for us because we have to keep learning about it if we're going to use it. And so sometimes when we're faced with the technology, we're a bit confused about what we might actually do about it. And I think it's helpful to sort of just think back on how perhaps we struggled to think about how we might use something. When I was in my last year at school, my father gave me a calculator as a present. And I said, look, that's really nice, thank you, but could you take it back? Because I just don't think I'll use it, because I've got 4-figure log tables and I can just look things up. Right? Could not imagine that just plugging in the numbers would be faster. When I was starting at a university, in my first year, they brought in email and sent an email out to us all. And I said, well, can't you just put a note in our pigeonholes like you normally do? Like, what would be the value of sending around an email, right? So I think hopefully I'm not the only one who sometimes struggles to sort of imagine how these things might be used. So I want to talk about the positive side and the negative side of this, the sort of opportunities and the challenges in terms of doing really quality evaluation and thinking about them in terms of the standards, which I'm sure you'll are familiar with or become familiar with, around how can this make evaluation more useful, how can it make the quality of the data, the validity of it better, how can it actually improve ethical issues by giving more people voice and control, and how can it make evaluation more feasible, cheaper, faster, more practical. And then what are the risks where we might actually achieve the negative of each of these? So when we think about digital tools, we often think just about collecting data, but in fact, there's a number of these aspects. So I just want to touch on them all, just put up some examples that we can then discuss. So there's data collection is an important thing, but there's also data retrieval, actually making better use of the data that are available, and that's always been the case. You always had some opportunity to use existing data, but I think that's been one of the transformations. The ability to analyse data, I think, can massively improve our ability to do better evaluation. The notion of reporting is an issue, and that leads back to purposes, and that's the one I want to finish on about. I think all of this has the potential to massively democratise evaluation. So it's no longer just a technical thing done by experts for the officials, but something that can be actually done by communities. So let's just look at some of those. The data collection is being transformed by mobile data collection, and there's a whole boom industry in that, a lot of people trying out those, finding that they can get the data at lower cost, they can get better coverage of remote areas, they can set that up so they do better error checking, get better quality data, they can actually have ways to categorise open-ended questions, and most importantly, they can turn it around faster, so you can get analysis and reporting in more real time. So this is an example of a project called Water for People, which was looking at water quality, and they had massive problems with the quality of water in these places, and they used to have these terrible delays. It was really hard to get out there. You'd fill things out on a bit of paper, you'd have to ship it back in and so on. The mobile data collection means you can get really rapid turnaround on that data, and so you can actually respond when there's a problem with the water, and that just transforms it, so you're getting much more real time. The other thing that's happening is being able to not just collect data from data collectors who go out, but from anyone. This is an example of crowdsourced data. This is actually in Syria, and this group called Syria Tracker are tracking not only examples of violence but also outbreaks of polio. So they can get data from all sorts of sources: text messages, email, Twitter, web forms. It's decentralised. They still want to go and verify it, but they're just doing amazing things with this crowdsourced data that, again, has revolutionised what we do. Other ones are looking at a data collection, looking at photo voice. And what's here is it's not just collecting the data, but saying what it means. So it's giving, again, increasing control to community members to set the agenda, so that they not only take a photograph, the photograph's part of the data, but they also then select which is the most significant ones. They talk about what they mean, and then they identify the key themes. So they're interpreting the individual bits of data, they're interpreting the groups of data, and they're actually setting the agenda. And I think this is quite different, again, from just filling in a form. They're actually getting to say what the questions should be. But data retrieval is about using the existing data, and the whole area of big data is opening up real opportunities. If you haven't checked out the UN Global Pulse site, I really recommend you do. They have lots of examples there. They're taking a very experimental approach. They're trialling things. They're trying to see what actually adds value. And very interesting work coming out of Côte d'Ivoire, where they're looking at the data. See, the data is not about particular respondents. It's looking at anonymised mobile phone data, who people call, how long the phone calls are. And in this one, they were trying to identify what are the natural communities. So who are they calling? What are the groupings there? Other examples of where you can use this data is it can be an early indicator of financial stress. When people are under financial stress, they either don't top up their phones or they top them up for very small amounts. And so they're being able to track that, not for individuals, but to start to see the patterns and get an early warning that people are under financial stress. Another example coming out of Côte d'Ivoire is using the location of mobile phone towers as an indicator of the poverty level. And what they're finding there is it maps pretty well across their best available data, but it actually goes down to sort of sub-regional levels, so they can get much more fine-grained data. So there's terrific stuff that can be done about using existing data, and it's quite a paradigm shift, because it's not just that it was data collected for a different purpose, it's at a different scale. The notion of big data is data that's so large and voluminous that our traditional ways of analysing it can't be used. Which leads us to analysis. In the same way that Lotus 123 revolutionised financial management and local government in Australia in the 80s, the access to both packages for analysing qualitative and quantitative data is revolutionising what people can do. And also taking us into new forms of analysis. This is an example of social network mapping. It's coming out of a recent report that was looking at the research networks in banana researchers. And if you've got a hub and spoke like this, you can see who are the hubs, who are the core, the heart of these networks. If you're trying to get some information out to them, you might go through them. You can see if they're spanning different communities. Other analysis that's been done on this has been looking at where you've got very different thought communities and seeing how much or little crossover there is. And increasingly, the different packages are getting better at connecting. I went to the NVivo website recently, the QSR website. NVivo is a package for analysing qualitative data. I started using it back many, many years ago when it was pretty clunky. It's now got a much easier interface so more people can get something useful out quickly. And one of the things that's really noticeable here is the integration of that software to make it easier to analyse. So you can link it to your Survey Monkey or your other forms of data collection, and you can easily get data out into other formats. The other area that's transforming is in reporting, particularly providing interactive reports. So this is an example. This is called Stop Stockouts. It's looking at the problem of many of the medical services or health services, health clinics, not having the drugs they need to treat people. So on a particular day, people go out and they check what is actually in stock and which ones are out of stock of these important drugs. And not only do they report that, but they report it in a way that you can interact with it. And you can look at particular drugs, you can zero in and look not just at broad levels, but which actual clinics. And that notion of being able to actually interact and engage with the data makes it both more interesting, it allows people to customise it to meet their needs better. Here is another example of another interactive map. This is a community map of Kibera. It's a large informal settlement near Nairobi, and it had no maps, right? It was an informal settlement. It made it very difficult to deliver services, to know what was going on. So they did a massive mapping program with a GPS, and people were mapping what were the items of interest, so water points, toilet points, where you can buy kerosene, or all these sort of things are mapped, and you can zoom down or zoom out, and flag different things. So, and then finally, all of these combine, I think, to change the purposes or to give it more scope for purposes. That if a number of these tools can be more readily used, then community members can actually not only provide data for the evaluation, not only collect data for the evaluation, but actually help to say what should be the criteria, what should be the reporting, actually be involved in the management and the governance of evaluations. And this is an example from community scorecards. Really interesting research on that has suggested that where the communities develop the scorecards themselves, they have more impact on people. They have more impact in terms of improving the quality of services. So that's all the good news, but there's some challenges. And I just want to talk about three. The issue of quality, the challenges of the digital divide, and the requirement for continuous learning. So quality. A few years ago, I was very interested to see a series of stories that was all across the internet that blue-eyed people are more intelligent than brown-eyed people. I have brown eyes and everyone else in my household has blue eyes. So I was particularly interested in this, that obviously it was wrong, right? And it was picked up by it was on internet and everywhere. People were talking about it. And then there was all this pushback. People going, well, that's not fair. I'm very intelligent. My husband, that's not fair. They're discriminating against, people, groups of people with I tend to have brown eyes. It was all. And so I thought, this seems really fishy to me. And so I went digging because none of them were citing the original research. Right? And the name of the person that they were citing didn't seem to appear on any faculty list, so I went scratching back and back and back, and I finally found two papers from some time previously, 10 years earlier, that were about correlation of eye colour on self-paced and reactive motor performance. And when I read them, they'd had 20 college students, and they'd checked how well they could juggle, and then they looked at the colour of their eyes. And I thought, this can't, and I had a name, and I finally tracked down an email, and I thought, is that it? So I found the person, I emailed and said, really interested in this research, is there anything more, or is it referring to these articles? And she said, oh yeah, it's referring to these articles. They had a fantastic university marketing department that had done this fantastic media release and everyone had just swallowed it, all right? And this stuff happens all the time. People just pick up things and pass them on. Recently I saw UNDP Kosovo put out a tweet about the level of youth unemployment. And, you know, things are very tough in Kosovo and there's a lot of problems there. But they said, 8 out of 10 young people are unemployed. And I'm pretty sure it's 8 out of 10 young people looking for a job. It's not counting the people who are in study. You know, that difference between of the population or of the labour force is a big issue. And again, people just pick that up. So the quality is an issue. When things get spread so quickly, how can we ensure the quality of it? And I think some of the answer lies in the technology itself, looking at open data, open disclosure, requiring people to put links to original sources. We can do a lot through that. Second issue is about the digital divide. Who is not included if we're either collecting data through technology or engaging people or reporting through it, who's being excluded? And this recent article on technology and the future of humanitarian action had some really interesting statistics showing the massive growth in the access to mobile phone technology and internet access. Still not covering everybody by any means, but particularly the mobile phone technology has really increased. And so part of the solution to this seems to be about using the right sorts of technology. And the mobile phone data collection that's happening is often not using smartphones, it's using very plain phones. In the same way that you can use that for data collection, in our dissemination, we could be using other, very simple phones as a way to get around that. And then the final challenge is, I think, the ongoing learning. Now, this is a little slice of some of the technological tools that are there. This is looking at technology for discussion and forums. So you can have Google Circles and you can have Facebook and you can have a number of others. So you might know some of these but not the others, and you say, well, I could learn about the others and which one I'd use. And you could use those discussion boards in a number of ways. They might be a place where you collect data to see what people are doing. It might be a place where you engage in some dialogue. It might be a place where you report findings, okay, and engage people around that. So you could use them in different ways. But then there's actually a whole lot more. This is this conversation prism, which is this fantastic resource. It's very daunting, which shows a whole range of social media tools for different purposes. And each little icon is a different application or tool. And you suddenly start to go, my gosh, how do I know which to use or keep up? And I've actually got a real job to do. And again, I think the technology might be a way of helping us with that, to use our digital connections to learn which ones are going to be useful and then how to use them well. So I'm sure that some of these will be familiar, but just to think about, My M&E has a lot of sources around, including some e-learning and some webinars that you can attend. LinkedIn groups are a fantastic source where people raise questions and give links to information. Facebook is increasingly being used by evaluation organisations to disseminate information and again, ask questions and so on. Twitter, if you go on and look for hash evaluation or hash eval, you find all sorts of interesting things. When people now are doing conferences, they actually will have often a Twitter feed. So if you can't attend a conference, you can follow the Twitter feed. Linda talked about the better evaluation, which brings together information and resources around different methods and also engages with people around building new knowledge about how to choose them and how to use them well. So it's based on co-created content where it's not just putting links to things you've found, but actually having an interplay of experts and users on it. So I hope there's been some ideas there about that you might take forward in terms of some of the opportunities of evaluation at the digital age and some of the challenges that are there. I guess the what's the same is that in the end we are trying to achieve that quality, and the issue is always going to be with all the tools, how do we use them well? So I'm going to stop at that point and be very pleased to take comments. Thank you.
My name is David Akana. First, thanks for the presentation, Patricia. I work for the Global Environment Facility in Washington, D.C. So first of all, I'm just going to add perhaps one quick slide to that, Patricia, just to say that I think one of the boost ones that you also have out there right now are sensors. So they're already being used in journalism, and it could be very vital to gather information in areas where you may not have a lot of credible data. So these sensors basically work for noise monitoring and air pollution. But the second point I was going to make is that if you speak to so many people who work on the knowledge and communication function in any evaluation office, the first thing they tell you is that it is pretty challenging to be able to move most of those who work in the office to depart from the hundreds, 200, 300 pages to this new technology and be able to reach out to several other stakeholders of the specific institution. And the question I was going to ask you is, do you have any specific evidence of what is working already using these new technologies, particularly on the reporting and communication side? Do you have any evidence that can move some people in some evaluation functions to be able to embrace this and actually make full advantage of it? Thanks.
Thank you. That's a really good question. Thank you for the one about evidence. Yes, what constitutes evidence, David? That's very interesting. No, I mean, I think that's part of what we're trying to do, is to identify these cases where we can actually track that through, because I think there's some persuasive examples that look more compelling. There's certainly, I talked more about interactive reports, but I think the data visualisation, there are some real examples around that. There's a book that I'd really recommend called by Stephanie Evergreen on visualising data, and that is evidence-based. I mean, it's really looking at going back to how people process information, so basic principles, and then actually looking at some comparisons of more or less effective reports. So there's certainly, in terms of the data visualisation about how information's presented, that I think there is a really solid base. The fashion for infographics, which again I didn't go into, I think is a bit untested. Certainly they're popular. Certainly they're spread around a lot more. People are much more inclined to share an infographic than a 200-page report. I think they seem to make a lot of sense, but I think the research needs to be done on exactly how to do them. And I think it's also how to layer them. I mean, ideally you have an infographic that gets the main messages and then has easy links to the details.
Hi, my name is Susan Bansurpansing. I'm from Suriname. I don't have a question, but I found it very interesting when you were like, for all the years seeing the laptop came and everything. And I was telling my son like 2 weeks ago that when I was growing up, we didn't even have a color TV. And he was like, say what? He just can't imagine that the time is changing that much and everything they do is with a computer and with a laptop and with the internet, So I just wanted to add that. It's so nice to see that flow, Thank you.
Yeah, and I hope, I mean, part of that was not just to say how incredibly old I'm feeling, but that I think in the same way going forward, there'll be stuff that, other people will take for granted, yeah.
Hello, thank you. My name is Ana. I come from Mexico. I want to thank you for the very pedagogic presentation. I consider myself being one of these people that is trying to hide from technology and try to resist having a cell phone and then a smartphone, etc. And it's my generation as well, but I wanted to ask you if you have any, it's very basic, if you have any tips or advice in how to learn what is out there. Probably it's related to the first question. If I am not updated in what methodologies or what tools, technological tools, are in use to facilitate our work, how can I get some update or idea? Because it's not my business, I am not related to that. So, but probably I should be interested, but go to a source that makes it easy for me.
Sure. You know, and I think it's always best to approach it with a purpose, you know, and so part of the putting the those digital connections at the end is that all of them give you the option, you know, there's different ways there to explore how to use that. So on some of these LinkedIn groups and so on, you can say, I want to do this, what would be appropriate? So there's that way that starts with the purpose and then fits the tool to it. There's a new guide on mobile data collection that PACT has just produced that actually says, you know, given that there has been some really good research on that showing that this can be a massive improvement in the quality of the data, which platform should you use and what are the things to take into account? So they've done some real, they've done the comparison shopping for you within that range of technology. But I also think we need more in terms of doing that matching, and that's why the PRISM, I think, is actually really helpful because it sort of says what is it that you want it to do, and then at least it narrows it down to 4 or 5 within that. You can talk about using a tool for a particular purpose.
Good evening. I'm Boris, coming from Moldova. Very impressive learning evening. Thank you very much. I have some comments and then question. Definitely, this digital era is an add value for human development. Certainly, we don't know what will be the next. What is the day of tomorrow of this digital era? Because what is high tech today, tomorrow is already old technology. Yeah. In the same way. Definitely, this is an add value for human development, but in the same time, you know, this is an issue of very serious challenge related to protection of personal data. Mm-hmm. For example, I have mobile with me, and mobile network can found me here from Moldova that I'm here now in Canada drinking beer.
No, not the drinking beer.
This is an issue regarding protection of private life and personal data.
Yes.
Somebody uses all this high-tech and digital technology on some criminalization of the issue. So what is the next of this digital era? How do you think? What is, I don't know, some new technologies, how to engage proper positive way for human development, avoiding this criminalization.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Look,
it's such kind of philosophy, but
no. Look, it's something that I didn't touch on, and I'm really glad you've raised it because both concerns about privacy and misuse of data are clearly there, and you know, all the stuff Facebook collects on you and then uses, all the stuff Google collects on you and then uses, it does raise real concerns. And I know there were a lot of people very concerned with Facebook. If you particularly you load up a picture of your child, put up on Facebook, people can go to the geocode, find out where that was taken, find out where your house is. And you know, again, if you don't have your privacy settings up, then it could be going out publicly, and even if you do, they're trusting that the organisation is going to use that well. So I think ethically, there are some real issues there. There's scope for improved ethics in that sort of democratisation, but there's also some real risks that we have to manage. So thanks for putting that on the agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Celo from Zimbabwe. My question is very short. What is the role of analysis here, especially on the visuals? Because there's some sense of speed that you need to let the world know, particularly even in a live way. So are we putting analysis, or we are leaving to the consumers to interpret in the way they want? So at the end of the day, I don't know what will be the communication, or we are just leaving it to the audiences just to interpret it the way they want it.
Thank you. It's a great question. And the people who do infographics, the data science people and so on, are very clear that they do the analysis. I mean, people can do other stuff as well, but that you must do the analysis, and you must be clear about what the messages are, that you don't just get data and put it out there, you know, that you actually do that analysis. And one of the things that I think there is a risk that you do less analysis because you just put things up, raw data, or you do bad analysis because you're not checking, and you know, people have these tools but they don't know how to use them well, and they make mistakes. There was a classic case where you know, people made mistakes in their spreadsheet and got the wrong data, and you know, made all these decisions on it. And if you're not having the formal systems, you don't check on that. But it can improve the quality of analysis because of turning it around faster, so that you can do more cycles of analysis, reporting, feedback, drill down. We do Google Analytics on the Better Evaluation website, and we can not only say how many people have visited, but which pages they came to and which ones they went to. So it is we're not tracking individuals, but we are tracking what people do. So there's potentially a privacy issue there, but we don't track individuals. You can't track ISPs. But you can iterate. You can say, wow, a lot of people did that. Gee, there's lots of people came. There's one time there was this page, a blog page that had been up for 2 years or a year, and suddenly it had all these hits, and we went, what's going on there? And we could say, go back and track back and find out why it was. So that iterating between the reporting and the analysis, I think, can make it much better. And I think that speed really helps. When I started doing computers, using SPSS on punch cards, you know, you'd sit there and punch these things, and you'd put it in a box and give it to the computer people to put through the computer, and then you'd come back 2 hours later to get your tables. And if you'd left off a full stop, it wouldn't run. So you come back 2 hours later and go, oh, I've got to do it again. So your ability to go back and forth, to sort of go, oh, that's interesting, let's drill down more. I wonder if it's like this. I wonder, can I put this other data with it, is much better now. And I think not only it will help us do better analysis, but I think some of the non-experimental causal inference, where you actually need to bring lots of data together, is much easier to do now.
I think we'll be able to take one final question, and I think we have the microphone over here.
Hello, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm Rudo. I come from Zimbabwe. It's really an interesting presentation, and my comment is really I don't know how can we mitigate the challenges, because I've seen like an example where some evaluation findings were actually disseminated on Facebook, and it just, what can I say, it just affected the whole program that was being implemented, because this evaluation was not credible, and they went on to disseminate the findings on internet, on Facebook. So in the end, now all the money that had been put in the program was actually wasted, because people had other information. And you can imagine, if it's the negative side, it means people actually propagate it more. So for me, really, it's a challenge to say, how can we try to mitigate these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess that's sort of, for me, where the things that are the same is that quality matters. You know, the quality, the validity, the checking it, focusing. So at the beginning, focusing on the utility. There's a real risk that people get dazzled by the toys and go off and do stuff that's not actually related to what they need to do. Sometimes the information you need is very simple and the reporting is very simple and you don't need anything like this. You know, focus, so start with your purpose, why you're doing it, and then make sure you build in pay attention to the quality, and I think that's a really important lesson to remember. Thank you.